Sunday dinners at my parents' house in suburban Phoenix had become a monthly torture session, but I kept showing up anyway. There I sat across from my sister Sierra, watching Mom slice apple pie while Dad poured coffee into mismatched mugs. The familiar sting of comparison was already building as Mom launched into her usual speech about Sierra's supposed success running a marketing consultancy in Los Angeles. When I tried mentioning my recent certification in dental radiology, Mom waved dismissively and hissed across the table. "You're just bitter because Sierra succeeded where you failed." That was my breaking point. I set down my fork and said quietly, "Then ask Sierra to return the $61,000 I've given you since college to keep this house from foreclosure." Dad's fork clattered against his plate. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on our dining room. Mom's face had gone completely pale, and Sierra's confident smirk vanished faster than ice cream on summer pavement. I pulled out my phone with steady hands, surprised by how calm I felt after keeping this secret buried for so long. 3 years, I said, scrolling through my banking app. Every single month since Dad lost his construction job during the housing market downturn. $1,500 for the mortgage, plus whatever extra you needed for utilities, medical bills, and groceries. Dad stared at his coffee like it might contain answers. "Tamara, honey, we never asked you to, you didn't have to ask." I showed them the screen displaying my transaction history. "You called crying about foreclosure notices. You mentioned cutting back on Mom's diabetes medication because money was tight. What was I supposed to do? Pretend I didn't hear?" Sierra finally found her voice. "This is so typical of you, making everything about money and showing off like some kind of martyr. We're trying to have a nice family dinner, and you're making everyone uncomfortable with this charity speech." I turned to look at my younger sister. Really look at her. Designer handbag hanging on her chair, expensive jewelry catching the overhead light, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her water glass. Nothing about her appearance suggested financial struggle. "Showing off," I repeated. "Sierra, I've been working double shifts at the dental office and picking up weekend work at the urgent care clinic. I live in a 400-square-foot studio apartment because every extra penny comes here. My boyfriend David keeps asking why I won't move in with him, and I can't explain that I'm financially supporting my parents without making them feel ashamed." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, but I noticed she couldn't meet my gaze. "We never wanted you to sacrifice your own future, sweetheart, if we had known you were struggling. But that's just it," I interrupted, feeling something shift inside my chest. "I never told you I was struggling because I didn't want you to feel guilty. I ate ramen noodles 4 nights a week and bought my clothes at thrift stores. I turned down every invitation from friends because I couldn't afford to go out. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years." The weight of my sacrifice was finally hitting me as I spoke the words aloud. 3 years of my 20s, gone. 3 years of living like a college student while my peers bought houses, traveled, built their careers without the constant drain of supporting an entire household. Sierra crossed her arms defensively. "Well, maybe if you had chosen a better career path instead of cleaning teeth all day, you wouldn't be in this situation. Some people invest in themselves instead of throwing money at problems." Dad's head snapped up. "Sierra, that's enough. Your sister has been keeping this family together while you—" He stopped himself, but the damage was already visible in Sierra's flushed cheeks. "While I what, Dad? While I built a successful business from nothing? While I made something of myself instead of settling for a dead-end job in some boring office?" I felt my phone buzz with a text from David. "How's dinner going? Remember what we talked about?" Had been encouraging me to stop sending money home, pointing out that my parents never seemed to ask about my own financial health or future plans. Id defended them, insisting they were just proud people who hated accepting help. Now, sitting in this familiar dining room surrounded by furniture Id helped pay for, I wondered if David had seen something I'd been too loyal to notice. The way conversations always centered around Sierra's achievements, the way my own accomplishments got dismissed or ignored, the way I'd become the family's silent financial safety net while Sierra played the role of golden child. You know what really bothers me, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. It's not the money. It's that I've been treated like a failure at every family gathering while secretly keeping this family afloat. Every time you compare me to Sierra, every time you suggest I'm not living up to my potential, I'm sitting here knowing that without my contributions, this house would have been sold 2 years ago. Mom was crying now, mascara leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. Tamara, we never meant to make you feel unappreciated. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished. Are you? I asked. Because an hour ago you called me a failure for being a dental hygienist. You've never once asked about my promotion opportunities, my continuing education, or my plans for the future. But you spend entire dinners talking about Sierra's supposed client meetings and business expansion. The truth was settling over us like dust after an explosion. Sierra's business success had become such a central part of our family identity that questioning it felt dangerous. But as I looked around the table, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd been carrying secrets. Sierra's defensive anger was escalating in a way that seemed strangely familiar, like watching someone build a house of cards in a windstorm. The more she insisted on her success, the more her story began developing curious gaps and contradictions. You don't understand the pressure of running a consulting business, she snapped, gesturing with hands that sported what looked like a very expensive manicure. I have office overhead, employee salaries, client development costs. Just because I don't broadcast every financial detail doesn't mean I'm not successful. I tilted my head, studying her more carefully. Office overhead? Last month you told Mom you were working from a co-working space. The month before that, you mentioned meeting clients at coffee shops to save money on rent. Sierra's face flickered with something that might have been panic. Co-working spaces are offices, Tamara. God, you're so literal about everything. Successful people network in multiple locations. It's called business strategy. And your employees, I continued, feeling like I was pulling on a loose thread that might unravel everything. You mentioned having to let someone go because of budget constraints, but then last week you posted on social media about hiring new talent. Social media isn't a documentary of my daily operations. Sierra shot back. But her voice had taken on a higher pitch. I don't owe anyone a detailed breakdown of my staffing decisions. Dad was looking between us with growing confusion. Sierra, honey, what exactly does your company do again? I know you've explained it before, but I'm having trouble following all the different projects you've mentioned. The question hung in the air like smoke. Sierra's mouth opened and closed twice before she managed to speak. We provide comprehensive digital marketing solutions for small to medium-sized businesses, social media management, content creation, brand development. It's complex, Dad. Not everyone can understand the technical aspects. But Id caught something in her explanation that didn't match her previous stories. Wait, I thought you specialized in restaurant marketing. Didn't you tell us about landing that big contract with a chain of Italian restaurants in Orange County? Sierra's jewelry caught the light as her hands started moving more frantically. That's part of it. We work with restaurants, retail, professional services. Diversification is key in consulting. You wouldn't understand the strategic thinking involved. Mom leaned forward, clearly trying to support her daughter. Sierra's always been so creative and business-minded. Remember how she used to set up those lemonade stands as a child? She charged premium prices and always sold out. Actually, I said, memories surfacing with uncomfortable clarity. She charged premium prices, and I was the one who made the lemonade and convinced neighborhood kids to buy it. Sierra handled the money and took credit for the sales. The parallel to our current situation wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Sierra's face was now flushed with something beyond simple embarrassment. That's completely different, she protested. We're talking about my adult career, not childhood games. I've built something real in Los Angeles. Just because you're stuck in the same small-town mindset doesn't mean everyone else is limited by your lack of ambition. David had texted me earlier about noticing inconsistencies in Sierra's social media posts. things that didn't add up when he looked at them with his accountant's eye for detail. Id dismissed his concerns as professional skepticism, but now I found myself thinking about the expensive purse hanging on her chair, the designer jewelry, the perfect makeup and clothing that suggested someone with significant disposable income. Sierra, I said carefully, if your business is doing so well, why didn't you help Mom and Dad when they were facing foreclosure? You knew they were struggling. You were here for some of those conversations about cutting expenses and postponing medical appointments. The question landed like a physical blow. Sierra's confident posture crumbled slightly, and for the first time since dinner started, she looked genuinely vulnerable. My business was in a growth phase. All the profits were being reinvested. You can't just pull money out of a company during crucial development periods without damaging long-term potential. But Dad was staring at her with the expression I'd never seen before. Sierra, are you telling us the truth about your situation in California? The simple question broke something inside her. Sierra's careful composure finally shattered completely, and words started tumbling out faster than she could control them. Fine, you want the truth? I work 25 hours a week at a smoothie shop in Venice Beach. My consultancy consists of 3 small businesses that pay me $50 each to post on their social media accounts twice a week. I live in a converted garage behind someone's house, and I've been maxing out credit cards just to afford groceries. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad's face went through a series of expressions that settled on something between heartbreak and confusion. The expensive clothes, the jewelry, the purse, I said quietly, understanding flooding over me. Knockoffs from downtown Los Angeles. Sierra whispered, tears finally starting to flow. Good enough to fool people on social media. I needed everyone to think I was succeeding. I needed you all to be proud of me. The weight of her confession settled over our family dinner like a heavy blanket. 3 years of carefully constructed lies. 3 years of letting our parents believe their golden child was thriving while I sacrificed my own financial security to keep them afloat. But why? Mom asked, her voice breaking. Why didn't you just tell us the truth? Sierra looked around the table at all of us, and for the first time in years, I saw my little sister instead of the polished facade she'd been presenting to the world. Because Tamara was already the good daughter, the responsible one with the stable job and the reliable boyfriend. I was supposed to be the success story, the one who took risks and made it big. How could I come home and admit that I was barely surviving while my older sister had everything figured out? The irony was almost too much to bear. While Sierra had been performing success to maintain her position as the family's pride and joy, I'd been quietly sacrificing my own dreams to ensure our parents' basic survival. Both of us had been living lies, but only one of us had been paying the price in real dollars and lost opportunities. As Sierra's sobs began to subside, Dad set down his coffee cup with unusual force. The sound seemed to break him out of whatever trance had been in since Sierra's confession. I need to tell you something, Tamara, he said, his voice carrying a weight I'd never heard before. About the house payments. About the foreclosure notices. My stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with Mom's apple pie. What about them? Dad rubbed his forehead, leaving red marks where his fingers pressed against his skin. We haven't been behind on the mortgage in 18 months. The bank refinanced our loan at a much lower rate when I got the job at Henderson Construction last year. We've actually been current on payments since then. The words hit me like cold water. I felt my carefully constructed understanding of the past 3 years beginning to shift and crack. But the money I've been sending, where did it go? Mom's crying intensified. But this time it sounded different. Guilty instead of hurt. Ashamed instead of surprised. Margaret, Dad said quietly, you need to tell her. My mother's hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. It went to Sierra, she whispered. All of it. We've been sending your money to Sierra to help her with rent and expenses in Los Angeles. The dining room started to feel like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what I'd just heard. You took the money I thought was saving your house and gave it to Sierra. We thought we were helping both of you, Mom said desperately. Sierra was struggling so much, and we knew you were doing well at the dental office. It seemed like the right thing to do. Doing well. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Mom, I've been living like a college student for 3 years. I eat cereal for dinner half the time. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I drive a car with 170,000 miles on it because I can't afford payments on anything newer. Dad was staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. We convinced ourselves it was temporary. Sierra kept saying she was on the verge of big breakthroughs, major contracts that would change everything. We thought if we could just help her get established, she'd be able to pay everyone back. The math was starting to come together in my head, and each calculation felt like a small explosion. So Sierra's been getting $2,000 a month from my contributions? For 3 years. Sometimes more, Mom admitted, her voice barely audible, when she had special expenses or opportunities. The Venice Beach apartment is expensive, and she needed professional clothing for client meetings. Client meetings, I repeated, remembering Sierra's confession from just minutes earlier. For the 3 small businesses that pay her $50 each. Sierra had stopped crying and was now staring at the table like she wished it would swallow her whole. I never asked them to lie to you. I thought the money was coming from their savings or Dad's income. I didn't know you were sacrificing your own life to support me. But even as she said it, something about her tone didn't ring completely true. I turned to study her face more carefully. Sierra, you called me 6 months ago, asking about my work schedule. You wanted to know how many hours I was putting in each week, whether I was getting overtime pay. You seemed really interested in my financial situation. Her silence was answer enough. You knew, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You knew the money was coming from me, and you didn't say anything. I suspected, she admitted quietly. But I told myself it wasn't my responsibility to manage your relationship with Mom and Dad. If you wanted to send them money, that was your choice. Dad's face was cycling through emotions faster than I could track them. Sierra, you let your sister work herself to exhaustion while you used her money to maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford. I was trying to build something, Sierra said defensively, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. I thought if I could just get established, if I could make the business work, it'd be able to pay her back with interest. The scope of the betrayal was becoming clear, but something else was bothering me. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw something I'd missed before. They weren't acting like people who'd been caught in an innocent mistake. They were acting like people who'd been caught in a deliberate deception. How long have you known Sierra's business wasn't real? I asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know before either of them spoke. We suspected for about a year, Dad finally admitted. Small things didn't add up. The stories kept changing. But we'd already been sending her money for so long, and she seemed so fragile whenever we questioned anything. Fragile, I repeated. So you kept taking my money and sending it to her because she seemed fragile, while I was working 70-hour weeks and living on savings account fumes. We thought you were stronger, Mom said desperately. You've always been so capable, so independent. Sierra needed more support. The words felt like a slap. I needed support too. I needed my family to care about my financial health, my future, my dreams. I needed someone to notice that I was drowning while trying to save everyone else. My phone buzzed with another text from David. Everything okay? You've been quiet. Looking at his message, I realized this conversation was about so much more than money. It was about 3 years of feeling like a failure at family dinners while secretly being the family's financial foundation. It was about watching my parents light up when Sierra walked into a room while treating my presence like an afterthought. It was about sacrificing my own future while funding my sister's elaborate lie. But most of all, It was about discovering that my entire family had been willing to let me believe I was saving their house while they used my desperation and love to fund a deception that benefited everyone except me. I was still processing the magnitude of my family's financial deception when Mom made a comment that stopped me cold. "At least now we can address Sierra's concerns about your relationship with David," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "She's been so worried about you getting involved with someone who might not have your best interests at heart." Something sharp and cold settled in my chest. "What concerns?" Sierra's head snapped up, and I watched panic flash across her face. "Mom, that was supposed to be— What concerns, Sierra?" I demanded, my voice cutting through her attempted deflection. "It's nothing major," Mom said, clearly unaware she'd just stepped on a landmine. "Sierra just mentioned that David seemed controlling, and she thought she remembered seeing you with your ex-boyfriend Marcus at some social event. She was worried you might be emotionally confused." The room felt like it was tilting. "Sierra told you I was cheating on David." "Not cheating exactly," Dad said carefully, "but she thought you might still have unresolved feelings for Marcus. She showed us some social media posts that seemed to suggest you'd been in contact with him." I turned to stare at my sister, feeling pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed suddenly clicking into place. "What social media posts?" Sierra was already shaking her head frantically. "It wasn't like that. I was just concerned about you making good choices. I didn't want to see you get hurt." "Show me," I said quietly. "Show me exactly what you showed them." "I don't have the screenshots anymore," Sierra said quickly. "It was months ago, but I was remembering things now. David pulling away from me over the summer. Conversations where he seemed suspicious and distant. Questions about my ex-boyfriend that had seemed to come from nowhere. It attributed his behavior to work stress and the natural challenges of a relatively new relationship." "Did you contact David directly?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Sierra's silence was answer enough. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my messages with David. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A conversation from August where Head asked pointed questions about Marcus, mentioned concerns that had seemed completely random at the time. "You called him," I said, the certainty settling over me like cold metal. "You called my boyfriend and told him I was cheating." "I called him because I was worried about you," Sierra said, but her voice was getting higher and more defensive. "You were working so much, sending all that money home. I thought you might be making emotional decisions because you were exhausted and stressed." "What exactly did you tell him?" Sierra looked around the table like she was hoping someone would rescue her from this conversation. "I might have mentioned that I'd seen you with Marcus at a few places around town. I thought David should know that you were still in contact with your ex. Marcus lives in Denver," I said quietly. "He moved there 2 years ago for a job with an engineering firm. I haven't seen him since my birthday party 3 years ago." The lie was so blatant, so easily disprovable, that for a moment no one spoke. "I must have been mistaken," Sierra said weakly. "Sometimes people look similar from a distance." But I was remembering more now. David's questions about my commitment to our relationship. His suggestion that maybe we should slow things down. His gradual withdrawal from making future plans together. I'd thought he was having natural doubts about us, but now I realized had been responding to deliberate misinformation from my sister. "What else?" I asked. "What else did you tell him?" "Nothing major," Sierra insisted, but she couldn't meet my eyes. "Just that you seemed emotionally unstable sometimes. Overly focused on family drama. Maybe not ready for a serious relationship." Each word felt like a small knife. David was a thoughtful, careful man who would absolutely take concerns about emotional instability seriously. Had been pulling away not because Head lost interest in me, but because my own sister had convinced him I was unstable and potentially unfaithful. "Did you contact anyone else?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. Sierra's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "Who else, Sierra?" "I might have called your workplace," she whispered. "When you missed that promotion last spring?" I thought they should know you were dealing with some personal stress that might affect your job performance. The promotion, the office manager position that had gone to Janet, even though Id had more experience and better performance reviews. I'd been devastated, unable to understand why Dr. Richardson had seemed suddenly cool toward me during the interview process. What did you tell them? Just that you were family's primary financial support and it was causing you emotional strain. I thought they should understand if your performance seemed inconsistent. You told my boss I was financially desperate. I told them you were under stress, Sierra said defensively. I thought it would help explain if you seemed distracted or overwhelmed at work. But I understood now why Dr. Richardson had asked strange questions during my interview. Questions about my long-term commitment to the practice, my ability to handle additional responsibilities while managing personal challenges. Id thought he was being thorough, but had been trying to assess whether I was emotionally stable enough for a management position. My sister had systematically sabotaged my relationship, my career advancement, and my financial security while benefiting from my sacrifices. The scope of her betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt dizzy trying to process it all. Why? I asked, though I was no longer sure I wanted to hear the answer. Why would you deliberately hurt me like this? Sierra's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the scared little girl I remembered from our childhood. Because everyone always loved you more, she whispered. You were the smart one, the responsible one, the one with the plan. I needed something for myself. I needed to be special at something. So you decided to make me look unstable and unreliable to the people who mattered most in my life. I thought if you seemed less perfect, maybe Mom and Dad would need me more. Maybe David would realize you weren't as amazing as he thought. Maybe your boss would see that you weren't as competent as everyone believed. The honesty of her confession was almost worse than the lies had been. My sister hadn't sabotaged my life in a moment of anger or jealousy. She'd planned it systematically, targeting my relationship, my career, and my reputation, while accepting my money to fund her deception. Looking around the table at my family, I realized that every relationship I'd trusted had been built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. My parents had used my love and loyalty to fund Sierra's lifestyle, while letting me believe I was saving their home. Sierra had used my success and stability as targets for destruction, while positioning herself as the family member who needed the most support. I'd spent 3 years believing I was the family failure while actually being the family's foundation, and every person at this table had been complicit in maintaining that illusion. As I sat there absorbing the magnitude of Sierra's systematic campaign against my life, Dad cleared his throat in a way that immediately put me on alert. The sound carried a weight that suggested more confessions were coming. Tamara, he said slowly, there's something else you need to know. About what we knew regarding Sierra's activities. My mother shot him a warning look, but he continued anyway. We weren't completely innocent bystanders in what Sierra was doing. She convinced us that her actions were actually helping you become more independent and self-reliant. The words hit me like ice water. Helping me. Sierra said you were becoming too dependent on family approval, Mom said quietly, her voice shaking. She thought that by creating some challenges in your personal and professional life, you'd learn to stand on your own feet without needing our validation. I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. You knew Sierra was sabotaging my relationship and my career, and you thought it was helpful. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. She framed it as tough love. She said you were sacrificing too much for family and not focusing enough on building your own life. She convinced us that a little adversity would help you prioritize your own happiness. So you helped her. The silence that followed was deafening. Sierra was staring at her hands, but Mom and Dad exchanged a look that confirmed my worst suspicions. What exactly did you do? I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. We provided some information, Mom admitted. About your work schedule, your relationship milestones with David, your financial situation. Sierra said she needed to understand the full picture to know how to best support your growth. Support my growth, I repeated. By undermining everything stable in my life. Dad's face was flushed with what I hoped was shame. Sierra painted it as an intervention. She said you were giving too much of yourself to family obligations and not enough to your own future. She convinced us that creating some instability would force you to set healthier boundaries. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar, scrolling back through months of family dinners, phone calls, and text conversations. "Show me Mom's calendar," I said quietly. "What?" Mom looked confused. "Your calendar. The one you keep on your phone for church events and social activities. Show it to me." Mom hesitantly handed over her phone, and I scrolled through her calendar entries. What I found made my blood run cold. Phone call with Sierra. Tamara update. I read aloud from an entry dated 2 months ago. Sierra check-in. David situation. From last month. Family strategy discussion. From 3 weeks ago. There were dozens of entries spanning the past year and a half. Scheduled phone calls, planned conversations, coordinated efforts that had nothing to do with normal family communication. "You've been having strategy meetings," I said, the full scope of their betrayal finally becoming clear. "About me. About my life. About how to manipulate my circumstances." "It wasn't manipulation," Sierra protested weakly. "It was intervention. We thought you were sacrificing too much and needed help learning to put yourself first. By destroying my relationship, sabotaging my career, and taking my money under false pretenses, Dad looked like he might be sick." When you put it like that, it sounds much worse than how Sierra explained it to us. "How did Sierra explain it?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "She said you were stuck in people-pleasing patterns that were preventing you from achieving your full potential. She said that by creating some controlled challenges, we could help you develop stronger boundaries and self-advocacy skills. The psychological manipulation was so sophisticated that I almost admired Sierra's twisted creativity. Shed convinced our parents that systematically undermining my stability was actually a form of therapeutic intervention designed to help me grow. And you never questioned this approach." Sierra seemed so confident, Dad said desperately. Shed researched psychology articles about codependency and enabling behaviors. She showed us studies about how adversity can promote personal growth. It all sounded very scientific and well-intentioned. I scrolled through more calendar entries, finding evidence of their coordinated campaign stretching back almost 2 years. "What kind of information did you give her about my relationship with David?" "Schedule details," Mom admitted. "When you had dates planned, when you seemed stressed about the relationship, when you mentioned future plans together." Sierra said she needed to understand your emotional patterns to know when interventions would be most helpful. "And my work situation. Performance reviews, promotion timelines, workplace stress levels," Dad said. Sierra thought if she could create some professional challenges right before major opportunities, you'd be forced to advocate for yourself more aggressively. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. They'd turned my trust and openness into weapons against my own stability. Every family dinner where I'd shared my hopes and concerns had been a data-gathering session for Sierra's sabotage campaign. "Did you ever consider that maybe I was actually fine the way I was?" I asked. "That maybe my willingness to help family and maintain stable relationships were strengths, not character flaws that needed to be corrected?" The question seemed to hit them like a physical blow. "Sierra was so convincing," Mom said tearfully. "She said we were enabling your tendency to put everyone else's needs before your own. She made it sound like we were being loving parents by supporting her efforts to help you become more assertive." I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd felt criticized and diminished, all the conversations where my achievements were dismissed while Sierra's fabricated successes were celebrated. All the times I'd left their house feeling like I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or accomplished enough. So every time you made me feel like a failure at family dinners, that was part of Sierra's plan. Dad nodded miserably. She said positive reinforcement was making you too comfortable with underachievement. She convinced us that high expectations and constructive criticism would motivate you to reach higher. While she was living off my money and destroying my professional reputation, The irony was staggering. While I was being criticized for lack of ambition and achievement, I was actually funding my sister's lifestyle and bearing the brunt of her systematic campaign to undermine my success. "We thought we were helping both of you," Mom said desperately. "Sierra seemed to be thriving, and we believed her methods would eventually help you thrive too." Looking around the table at my family, I realized that what I'd experienced wasn't just betrayal or financial exploitation. It was psychological abuse disguised as intervention, carried out by people who claimed to love me while systematically destroying my confidence, relationships, and opportunities. And the most devastating part was that they'd convinced themselves they were doing it for my own good. We'd been sitting in stunned silence for about 10 minutes when the sound of a car door slamming in the driveway made us all freeze. Sierra had stormed out earlier, but apparently her dramatic exit hadn't been as final as it seemed. The front door opened without a knock, and Sierra walked back into the dining room accompanied by our cousin Jake and a woman I'd never seen before. The woman was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a serious expression that immediately put me on edge. "I've brought legal counsel," Sierra announced, her voice carrying a confidence that seemed forced. "What's been happening here tonight constitutes financial elder abuse, and I won't stand by while Tamara manipulates our parents." The woman stepped forward and extended her hand toward me. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, an attorney specializing in family law and elder abuse cases. Sierra has asked me to review the financial arrangements between you and your parents." I stared at her, trying to process this sudden shift in dynamics. Financial elder abuse, the systematic provision of money to elderly individuals in exchange for emotional control and influence over family relationships, Jennifer said, pulling documents from her briefcase. "What Sierra has described to me constitutes a clear pattern of coercive behavior designed to establish yourself as the family's financial gatekeeper." Dad's mouth fell open. "Tamara hasn't been coercive about anything. She's been helping us." "With money you never requested," Jennifer interrupted, in amounts that created financial dependence, while positioning herself as the family's savior and making other family members feel inadequate by comparison. The twisted logic was breathtaking. Sierra had somehow managed to reframe my sacrifices as manipulation and her own deception as victimization. These documents outline the legal framework for financial elder abuse, Jennifer continued, spreading papers across our dining room table, including criminal penalties for individuals who use money to control family dynamics and isolate elderly individuals from other support systems. I picked up one of the papers, scanning the dense legal text with growing alarm. The language was official-looking, full of legal terminology that seemed to support everything Jennifer was saying. "What Sierra is proposing," Jennifer said, "is a resolution that protects your parents from further financial manipulation while ensuring that any money inappropriately given can be returned to prevent ongoing psychological damage." "Returned?" I asked. Sierra stepped forward, her earlier vulnerability completely replaced by cold calculation. "You need to sign over your savings account as restitution for the emotional damage you've caused this family. Jennifer has prepared documents that will transfer the funds to a neutral account while we sort out the legal implications of your behavior." The room felt like it was spinning. Somehow, Sierra had managed to turn herself into the victim and me into the perpetrator of financial abuse. The woman who'd been living off my money for 3 years was now demanding my savings as compensation for being the target of my supposed manipulation. "I don't understand," Mom said, looking between Sierra and Jennifer with confusion. "Tamara was helping us. We were grateful for her support." "Gratitude is a common response to financial abuse," Jennifer explained patiently. "Victims often feel indebted to their abusers because the money meets immediate needs, even though the long-term psychological cost is devastating." Dad shook his head. "This doesn't make any sense. Tamara never asked for anything in return. She never made us feel obligated or controlled. Financial control doesn't always involve explicit demands," Sierra said. "It can be as subtle as creating a dynamic where family members feel they can't criticize or disappoint the person providing money. Tamara's contributions made it impossible for anyone to challenge her behavior or set healthy boundaries. The manipulation was so sophisticated that I almost admired Sierra's creativity while simultaneously wanting to scream. She'd taken every loving gesture I'd made toward my family and reframed it as evidence of psychological abuse. Jake, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up. Tamara, I think you should consider what Sierra and Jennifer are proposing. This could get really complicated if it goes to court. Family court judges take financial elder abuse very seriously. I looked at the documents spread across the table, trying to read through the legal language while my heart pounded. The papers looked official, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. Can I see your credentials? I asked Jennifer quietly. She looked momentarily flustered. My credentials. Your bar admission, your law license. If you're representing Sierra in a potential criminal matter, I'd like to verify your qualifications to practice law. Jennifer's confident demeanor flickered slightly. That's an unusual request during a family mediation session. This isn't mediation, I said, my voice gaining strength. You're accusing me of criminal behavior and demanding I turn over my savings. I think verifying your credentials is pretty reasonable. Sierra jumped in quickly. Jennifer doesn't need to prove herself to you, Tamara. The important thing is resolving this situation before it escalates further. But I was looking more carefully at the documents now, and details were starting to bother me. The letterhead looked generic, the formatting was inconsistent, and several of the legal citations seemed oddly phrased. Where did you find these legal precedents? I asked, pointing to a section about financial elder abuse definitions. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. Those are standard citations from relevant case law. I pulled out my phone and started searching for the case numbers listed on the documents. The first search came up empty. The second search led to a completely different type of legal case. The third citation didn't exist at all. These cases don't exist, I said quietly. What? Dad leaned forward to look at my phone. The legal citations on these documents. I'm searching for them online, and they don't exist. These aren't real legal precedents. Jennifer's face was now visibly flushed. Online legal databases aren't always comprehensive. Who are you? I interrupted. Really? Who are you? And what's your actual relationship to Sierra? The silence stretched for almost 30 seconds before Jake cleared his throat. She's my girlfriend from law school. She's not actually licensed to practice yet, but she's studied family law extensively. The house of cards was collapsing faster than Sierra could rebuild it. Her final desperate attempt to turn the tables had been built on fake documents and a pretend lawyer. So you brought your cousin's law student girlfriend to threaten me with fake legal documents and criminal charges that don't exist. Sierra's mask of confidence was now completely gone, replaced by the same desperation I'd seen earlier when her business lies fell apart. The principles are still valid, she insisted. Even if the specific documents aren't official, the underlying legal concepts are real. You did use money to control this family's dynamics. I used money to keep our parents from losing their house, I said, my voice rising for the first time all evening. Money that you've been living off of while systematically destroying my relationships and career opportunities, and now you want to take my savings account as compensation for your own lies and manipulation. Mom and Dad were staring at Sierra with expressions I'd never seen before. Not disappointment or confusion, but genuine horror at what their daughter had become. Sierra, Mom said quietly, what have you done? But Sierra wasn't ready to give up. Even caught in her final lie, she was still fighting to find some way to avoid accountability for 3 years of deception and betrayal. You all act like I'm some kind of monster, she said, tears streaming down her face. But everything I did was because I felt invisible in this family. Tamara was always the perfect daughter, and I was always the screw-up. I needed something to make me special. Something that would make you proud of me, too. The admission was heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. My sister's pain was real, but her response to that pain had been to systematically destroy my life while benefiting from my sacrifices. Looking around the table at my family, I realized that this was either the moment where we found a way to rebuild our relationships on honesty and accountability, or the moment where I walked away from all of them forever. The fake lawyer incident seemed to break something fundamental in my family's ability to maintain illusions. As Jennifer hurriedly packed up her fabricated documents and Jake escorted her out of the house, the four of us sat in silence that felt different from all the previous silences of the evening. Finally, I spoke. "Here is what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Sierra is going to return every penny of the $61,000 over the next 2 years through a payment plan well established tonight. She's going to contact my workplace and explain that she provided false information about my personal situation due to family jealousy. She's going to call David and admit that she lied about seeing me with Marcus and about my supposed emotional instability." Sierra opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. All 3 of you are going to attend family therapy to address the enabling behaviors and favoritism that created this situation. Dad, you're going to help Sierra draft genuine resumes and job applications so she can build a real career instead of living off lies. Mom, you're going to stop comparing your daughters and start treating us as individuals with different strengths and paths." I took a breath, feeling steadier than I had in years. "And if anyone objects to these conditions, I'll walk out of this house tonight and you'll never see me again. I'll change my phone number, move to another city, and build a life with people who actually value my well-being over their own comfort." The threat wasn't melodramatic posturing. After everything I'd learned tonight, I genuinely felt prepared to start over completely if my family couldn't commit to fundamental change. Dad was the first to respond. "Tamara, everything you've said is fair. More than fair. I'm ashamed of how we've treated you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded paper. "I already got a second job last week. Construction work in the evenings after my regular shift. I wanted to start paying you back even before I knew the full scope of what we'd done." Mom nodded tearfully. "I've been so proud of Sierra's supposed success that I forgot to be proud of your real accomplishments. You're an amazing daughter, and I've been a terrible mother." I looked at Sierra, who was staring at the table like she wished it would swallow her whole. "Sierra," she looked up with red, swollen eyes. "I'll do whatever you want. I'll make the phone calls, I'll get a real job, I'll pay you back. But I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. I was jealous and stupid, and I hurt the person who's always been there for me." Her apology felt genuine, but I'd learned not to trust my family's words without corresponding actions. "The payment plan starts next month," I said. $250 monthly for Sierra. $500 monthly from Mom and Dad's household budget. I'll send you account information for direct deposits. Over the following months, the changes in my family were gradual but real. Dad's evening construction job was exhausting, but he never complained about the extra work. Mom threw herself into researching family therapy options and scheduled our first group session within 2 weeks. Sierra surprised me most of all. She got a job at a dental practice in Tempe, starting as a receptionist but quickly learning insurance procedures and patient care protocols. She'd always been naturally charming with people, and in a legitimate work environment, those skills translated into real professional growth. The conversation with my workplace was awkward, but ultimately positive. Dr. Richardson was embarrassed that Head allowed outside information to influence his assessment of my capabilities, and he made sure I was first in line for the next management opportunity. David's reaction when Sierra called him was a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that his instincts about my character had been correct. Anger that Head allowed someone else's manipulation to damage our relationship. We spent several long conversations rebuilding trust and establishing better communication patterns. "I should have talked to you directly instead of pulling away," he admitted during one of our evening walks. "But the things she told me seemed so specific and believable." "She's very good at lying," I said, taking his hand. "But that's her problem to solve, not ours." Our relationship emerged stronger from the crisis, built on a foundation of honesty that hadn't existed before. David helped me find a larger apartment that we eventually moved into together, and for the first time in years, I was able to make financial decisions based on my own goals instead of family obligations. Family therapy was challenging but transformative. Our therapist, Dr. Chen, helped Mom and Dad understand how their different treatment of Sierra and me had created unhealthy competition and resentment. She taught all of us better communication strategies and helped Sierra develop coping mechanisms for her jealousy and insecurity. Families often create roles that become prisons, Dr. Chen explained during one of our sessions. Tamara became the responsible caretaker, Sierra became the entertainer who needed rescue, and your parents became the judges who decided which role deserved more support. The process of breaking out of those roles was painful, but liberating. Mom learned to celebrate my achievements without comparing them to Sierra's situation. Dad started asking about my career goals and personal interests instead of just assuming I was content with the status quo. Sierra's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. Working in a real job with genuine responsibilities gave her confidence that wasn't based on lies or manipulation. She started dating a coworker who appreciated her humor and work ethic without knowing anything about her previous fabricated success. I forgot what it felt like to be proud of something real, she told me 6 months later as we painted the living room in her new apartment. The smoothie shop job was embarrassing, but it was honest work. This dental practice job actually makes me excited to go to work every day. The financial recovery took longer than the emotional healing. Sierra's payments were consistent but small, and my parents' contributions required significant lifestyle adjustments. But watching them prioritize repaying me over their own comfort was actually more valuable than the money itself. A year after that devastating family dinner, we celebrated my birthday with genuine joy instead of tense obligation. Sierra had been promoted to office manager at her dental practice. Dad had paid off enough debt to reduce his evening work hours. Mom had become an advocate for family therapy in her church community, and I had been promoted to regional supervisor for a network of dental practices, a position that came with both financial security and professional satisfaction. "I have something for you," Sierra said during the birthday dinner, handing me a wrapped box. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside was a photo album filled with pictures from our childhood, but instead of the usual family photos, these were candid shots of me at various ages, helping Sierra with homework, teaching her to ride a bike, defending her from neighborhood bullies, celebrating her small victories with genuine enthusiasm. "I found these in Mom's closet," Sierra said. "I'd forgotten how much you always looked out for me, even when we were kids. I want to be the sister who looks out for you now." The gesture was simple but meaningful. For the first time in years, I felt like we were building a relationship based on mutual respect instead of competition for parental approval. Looking around the table at my family, I realized that the woman who'd walked into this house a year ago, believing she was a failure, had actually been the family's foundation all along. The difference now was that everyone could acknowledge that reality, including me. The lesson I learned wasn't just about setting boundaries or demanding respect, though those things were important. It was about recognizing my own worth independent of other people's validation or need for my resources. I'd spent so many years trying to earn love through sacrifice that I'd forgotten love shouldn't require constant payment. True family support means celebrating each person's authentic success while offering help during genuine struggles. It means honest communication, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Most importantly, it means recognizing that everyone in the family deserves to thrive, not just the people who seem most fragile or demanding. My relationship with money changed too. Instead of viewing my income as a resource for solving other people's problems, I learned to make financial decisions based on my own goals and values. I started saving for a house, contributing to retirement accounts, and even planning vacations without feeling guilty about spending money on myself. The irony wasn't lost on me that learning to prioritize my own well-being actually made me a better daughter, sister, and girlfriend. When I stopped defining my worth through constant sacrifice, my relationships became more balanced and genuinely supportive. 2 years after that transformative dinner, David and I bought our first house together. Sierra and her boyfriend came to our housewarming party, along with Mom and Dad. Watching my family celebrate my achievements without any undercurrent of competition or manipulation felt like a miracle I'd never expected to experience. As we sat on the back patio of my new home, sharing stories and genuine laughter, I thought about how differently this scene would have felt 3 years earlier. Back then, I would have been worried about whether everyone was comfortable, whether the food was good enough, whether I was doing enough to make the gathering successful. Now, I was simply enjoying the company of people who had learned to love me without requiring constant proof of my devotion. "Thank you," Sierra said quietly as the evening wound down, "for not giving up on us, for fighting for something better instead of just walking away." "Thank you," I replied, "for becoming someone worth fighting for." Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your own family couldn't see your worth while you were sacrificing everything for them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How do you balance family loyalty with self-respect? Please like this video if Tamara's story resonated with you. Subscribe for more family revenge stories, and share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice for others, and that healthy relationships should make you feel valued, not invisible. Thanks for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize your own strength and value in whatever challenges you're facing.